Net metering 3.0. This has been the biggest conversation over the last few days, specifically in the California market. And today I want to bring you clarity into what it means and the why behind it. First of all, if you don't know who I am, my name is John Soriano, aka General John. I have been in the solar industry for the last 7 years. I have personally installed hundreds of accounts and have led a team that has installed over 7,000 accounts in the last few years. So I am speaking to you as a subject matter expert in this industry, of someone that's been selling solar in California for a long time, someone that was a part of solar when it was net metering 1, net metering 2, and then now net metering 3. So I want to come here to deliver just some clarity as to what net metering 3 is and what that means for the future of solar. And let me tell you that the overall message here is a good message. Solar is working in California. We as salespeople, as solar consultants, as solar installers, as the financiers behind this are paving the way for solar in California. And let me also remind you that California has always been the leader in solar. And as the leader in anything, you're always going to be the first one to encounter changes, the first one to encounter hardship. So as a reminder for those of you selling in California, don't let this change scare you. Okay, if anything, embrace it, because we are the leaders in California. Okay, the data shows that California is still the #1 market with most megawatts installed versus any other state. Okay, it goes #1 California, #2 Texas, #3 Florida. All right, we are leading the way and we will continue to lead the way. Okay, so let's get into NEM3. But before we do, I want us to firstly a couple of ground rules. Okay, before we get into it. All right, #1, if we're going to fully understand net metering 3, we have to be willing to take emotions out. Okay, we have to be willing to do that, because if we bring our emotions into this, we're going to go into this with a distorted lens. All right, we have to look at this through the lens of the bigger picture, and in order to do that, we can't get emotional. All right, we can't talk about us. All right, we can't talk about how this impacts us, because NEM3 is much bigger than all of us. It's much bigger than even solar. Okay, and I will get into that. All right, #2, we have to look at the perspective of not what is best for solar, but rather what is best for the energy infrastructure. We have to remember that solar is one piece of the whole equation. All right, solar is just one piece. We think sometimes solar is everything. Sometimes in the solar industry, it's very easy to paint the utilities to be these bad guys. And sure, in some ways they can be, but we have to be honest and understand that we need the utilities. We need the power lines. We need transformers and distributors. We need these things in order to make solar go. Without the power lines, we can't do solar. We can't effectively build a society where it's ran by renewable energies. Okay, so we have to be willing to look at it from the lens of not what is best for solar, but rather what is best for the energy infrastructure. All right, the third one, okay, all solar reps right now, so whether you sell in California or not, we have to understand that what is happening in California will happen to everybody in their market if solar does what it's supposed to be doing. Meaning, if you're selling in Texas and if you're doing your job, right, if you build a team, if you sell a lot of solar, guess what? One day this will happen to your market. If you're in Florida, same thing, okay? So we can't look at this as a bad thing, but rather as a thing that is inevitable. It's gonna happen to every single market, and I'll explain why. All right, the fourth one, change is hard, okay? Change is anything is hard, but it's always good in the long run, all right? I was in solar when we were in net metering 1, and when we transitioned to net metering 2, people freaked out. There were people saying this is the end of solar. There were people saying NEM2 is bad, yada, yada, yada. Guess what? Solar in California thrived under net metering 2. More so, actually, than net metering 1. Although it was much better to go solar in net metering 1 than it was in net metering 2, but the market adopted to it, the market adapted to it, and net metering 2 did amazing. People freaked out. Sure, the first few months was rough, right? We had to go from, telling people that they're going to get an equal 1-for-1 exchange for power to now they're going to enter a time of use rate model with NEM2. But guess what? We figured it out. Okay, we went from selling 100% offsets to now we had to pivot to, if we wanted to give someone a true 100% offset, we really had to sell a 115, 120% offset system. But guess what? We figured it out. Why? Because we're entrepreneurs, okay? Entrepreneurs adapt and overcome. That's what they do. So understand that change is hard, but change is good in the long run. For those of you that are speaking doom and gloom over net metering 3, again, I was here. Unless you were here from net metering 1 to 2, okay, you don't have the credential, the expertise to talk about how this is bad, because I was there when net metering 1 happened to 2, and here we still are. Solar thrived, and guess what? Solar will still thrive under net metering 3. Yes, is net metering 2 much better for the customer? Of course it is. I don't deny that. Net metering 2 is still better for the customer than it is for net metering 3, but we will still thrive. No different than how net metering 1 was better for the customer than net metering 2, but people still went solar, okay? And understand that, hey, this is a learning curve, okay? We're learning day by day. This just went live a few days ago, okay? So those are the ground rules, okay? So let's get into some of the meats and potato, okay? As to why we are here, why the net metering 3 go into effect, okay? First of all, let's talk about supply of energy, okay? Basic economics, supply and demand, right? When supply is high, all right, then we want to make sure that demand is high as well. But if demand is low, we also want to make sure supply is low, right? It doesn't make sense in any industry where if demand is high, you usually want to have a high supply as well, okay? I'm going to show you guys some charts here, okay? Again, data, okay? This is coming from the California Independent System Operator, okay? I'm going to provide a link of resources to back up everything I'm about to say, okay? Everything I'm saying has been through research, through a lot of different sources, a lot of independent sources, okay? From the Department of Energy to the California Independent Operator System to, other articles talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera, okay? So this is coming from the California Independent System Operator. Now, the California ISO, the goal there is to essentially just monitor and track the energy supply and demand and kind of see where it's coming from, okay? I'm going to show you this chart for the supply trend in 2016. So this chart here essentially shows you, all right, this chart shows you what the energy demand, the supply trend has been in 2016. So this is looking at June 20th of 2016. I remember right here, I'm painting the picture of what the problem is, okay? So in 2016, you can see here that in June, I chose June 20th because that is the day where we have the most sunlight, which in theory, that is the day when we should be getting the most production from solar power, okay? So this chart here shows you how much power came from natural gas, from renewables, large hydro, imports, batteries, nuclear, coal, etc. Okay. Now, renewables, solar makes up the vast majority of the renewable sector here, more than wind and water and all that. Okay. So you can see here, June 2016. Okay, June 2016. You can see during the peak demand, okay, of supply, which is between the hours of 10 a.m. to about 4 p.m., right? That is when solar is at the highest, okay? You can see that it was generating roughly 13,000 megawatts in 2016. And then you can see that the rest was coming from coal, okay? From natural gas, okay? Which natural gas is the number one source of power that's not coming from renewable energy, okay? So you can see that it was about equal, okay? Now, fast forward to 2022. This is June 20th of this year, okay? You can see a big difference in the supply of energy in the state, okay? Again, this is supply, all right? You can see now that in the peak of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., which is when solar works the best, supply is now even higher, okay? We are now, this year, we were supplying about 17,000 megawatts. So we were up 4,000 megawatts. Now, I didn't mention this, but in June of 2016, that is when we entered NEM2, right? NEM2 went into effect in the summer of 2016, okay? Fast forward now 6 years into NEM2, we can see that our supply has gone high. Hey, this is good. This shows that we were doing our job, right? That we were selling solar, we were building value to the customer, right? This data here shows that it was working. However, you can see that natural gas production is down. Why is that? Well, California has a mandate to be 100% renewable power by 2045. All right, this mandate has pretty much made it to where the utilities here have to make sure that they are fulfilling that mandate. So sources like natural gas have to come down, like coal have to come down. Most people don't know this, but as of right now, 2/3 of the power in California is coming from renewable energy. 2/3. I'll provide a source again in my links, but 2/3 of power is coming from renewable energy. Okay, people think that it's coming from dirty power. It's not actually. The data will show you that the majority of our power, again, look at the supply. Look, this chart here shows you that the majority of the supply is renewable energy. Not coal, not natural gas, but rather renewable energy, okay? I'm going to show you another chart. This is also on the California ISO website. It actually shows you real-life data, okay? This is a screenshot I took yesterday at 10:15 p.m. Now, if we all know our solar knowledge, we know that solar is not working at 10:15 p.m., right? Solar doesn't work. There's no sunlight at that time. This chart here shows you that -1% of power was coming from solar, okay? In other words, zero. No power was coming from solar. Now, here's a question for everybody. Is there still a demand of electricity at 10:15 p.m.? Of course there is. Okay, we still need power, but that power is not coming from solar. Okay, now so looking at this, you can see that the utilities or the infrastructure then has to shift to other sources of power. Right? You can see that at 10:15 p.m., 48.8% of power was coming from natural gas. Almost 50% of power had to come from a different source because we can't rely on renewable energy at 10:15 p.m. because the sun is not working. So the utilities, the infrastructure has to rely on other sources. Now, let's look at today. This is today at 12:15 p.m., so December 19th. This is at 12 o'clock when the sun is at the highest, okay? You can see here that solar, 76.3% of power is coming from solar. That's awesome, right? 3/4 of the supply at 12 o'clock is coming from solar, okay? 40%, and then, so that's in the renewable sector. Now, 40% of it is the whole renewable side. All right, so 40% of power in December at 12:15 is coming from renewable energy, and then 39% is coming from natural gas. So you can see that renewable energy there's more supply of renewable energy at 12:15 p.m. on December 19th and it's providing more power than any other source, okay? So what's the problem here? Why did NEM3 have to happen, okay? Because of the demand of energy, there's an imbalance of the demand of energy. Let me explain. Let me show you another chart. There's a chart here on the California ISO. Please, again, go on it, okay? Play with the numbers. You will see numbers don't lie, all right? There's a saying, women lie, men lie, but numbers don't lie, all right? Look at the charts for yourself. Check this out. This shows you the net demand trend, okay? Net demand trend essentially says, hey, what is our total demand of energy at any given time, all right? And then the net demand is how much demand is left after you account for renewables. Okay, so the blue line here shows you the total demand. Okay, in other words, this is also looking. I broke it down into 4 periods throughout the year. Okay, one in March 20th, June 20th, September 20th, and December 20th. Or I'm sorry, December 15th actually, to show you the difference quarter over quarter. Okay, the blue line here shows you the total demand. Okay, on that day and at that time. This here is broken down into 24-hour periods. So again, this is looking at March 20th of 2022. you can see that the peak around that time in the morning is 8 p.m. Okay, 8 p.m. That is when it's the highest demand. So on March 20th, the demand of energy was 20,000 megawatts, meaning Californians needed 20,000 megawatts of energy at about 8 p.m. Okay, you can see the purple here is the net. This is after you account for renewable energy. So essentially, this in the middle is what how much power is coming from renewable energy. Now, we know that most systems in California under NEM2 were designed on a south-facing or a west-facing roof plane, which means that the sun doesn't hit those roof planes around 8 a.m., okay? It usually starts to hit it after around noon. So you can see here that the net demand goes down after 8 a.m. because now solar is kicking in, right? You can see demand goes down a little bit, all right? Right here, the blue, all right? Demand goes down a little bit, but the net demand goes down astronomically, okay? Where around 12 p.m., when the sun's at the highest, the net demand is very low. This is good. This means that, hey, solar, when I say solar, I'm saying renewable. And remember that solar is the vast majority of the renewable portfolio. You can see here that solar is, or the renewables is accounting for all this energy. That's good, right? That's awesome, okay? But demand goes down, okay? And when demand goes down, supply should go down. However, that's not the case with the infrastructure. Right now, there's an imbalance because you can see here that when demand peaks, so demand is the highest on March of this year, was around 9 p.m. was when demand was the highest. But solar production was down. So we have to understand this, okay? This is the problem. And I'll show you in June, same problem, okay? You can see demand is lowest when renewable supply is highest, and then demand is highest when renewable supply is lowest. That's a problem. There's an imbalance in the infrastructure, okay? To where when solar is working the most, around this time frame, the infrastructure has to figure out how to store all this power. Okay, and right now what's happening is the infrastructure cannot hold all this power. So we're actually losing power. They're having to curtail power, okay, and we're losing a lot of solar production. But yet when demand is the highest, this is June, look at June, okay, demand in June peaked at about 8 p.m. Okay, 8 p.m. is when it peaked. You can see 36,000 megawatts was needed at that time. So the problem that the infrastructure faces is, where do you get this extra power, okay? You can see, same thing in September, all right? Same thing in December 15th, okay? So what this effect here is called the duck, it's actually called the duck effect, okay? Or the duck-tail effect or something like that, okay? I actually want to play this quick video that describes this problem probably better than I could explain it, okay? So check out this quick video.
Today, we're going to talk about the grid and a duck. An odd combination, but they actually do go together. This graph shows the hourly electric load on a spring day in California. It's the lowest at night when people are asleep. It starts rising as people wake up and peaks around noon, then tapers off starting around 6 p.m. Utilities balance this variable demand by ramping up and ramping down power plants to control their output. For decades, these patterns have remained relatively predictable. As more homes, businesses, and utilities go solar, these patterns are changing. Here is the same chart, but with some of the demand met by solar. The rest of the demand needs to be met by traditional power plants. As solar meets more demand during the day, it means less conventional energy is needed. But as solar production goes down at night, conventional energy needs to ramp up quickly to meet evening demand. This balancing act between energy supply and demand can waste some of the solar energy that's being generated. If solar generates too much power, utilities need to manage the oversupply on the market. They can decide to curtail solar production, which means they do not use some of the power that is generated. Fortunately, this only happens a handful of times every year and only in a few areas like California, where solar generates significant amounts of the utility's energy supply. So, what can be done to help address these issues? First, we can increase the flexibility of generation by adding diverse energy sources, increasing the geographic area in which we can balance power supply on the grid, and developing better prediction technologies. Second, pricing can be structured to incentivize consumers to use less energy in the evening, which would help reduce the ramping requirement as the sun goes down. And third, we can shift PV generation to the evening by storing power generated by solar earlier in the day. As we look to a future with exponentially higher amounts of solar energy connected to the grid, these strategies could enable the electricity system to use all the electricity generated from solar with more cushion for utilities to meet the evening load. So, that's how we're going to solve this tricky problem with the duck. Right now, these challenges are only faced in areas like California and Hawaii, where there's a lot of solar. But, with help from the Sunshot Initiative, these lessons learned can...
Okay, do you see the problem? The problem is our infrastructure is broken, okay? But we only got here because we made solar work. This is both a good and a bad thing, okay? We would not be here if we didn't have a high influx of solar energy, okay? So this is just simply the next evolution of solar here in the state of California. And I mentioned earlier, if you sell in a market like Texas or Florida, eventually if you do your job just as well, you might also be here as well. All right, we have to understand that as awesome as solar is not 100% reliable, meaning we can only generate power when the sun is out. But what do we do when the sun's not out? What do we do at nighttime? When I say what do we do, I'm talking about what do we do as a society that relies on energy? We can't rely on solar only, right? We need to have other sources of power that we can tap into when the sun is not out, okay? Which is what NEM3 is trying to address. So is NEM3 good for the solar industry, for people like myself? No, of course it's not, right? Yes, it's going to force me to adapt. No one likes to change, right? We all like to, stay comfortable with NEM2, but the reality is this: NEM3 is great for the energy infrastructure because right now the infrastructure is broken. Okay, I want to show you guys another chart here, okay? This is from the California ISO as well. This shows here the peak load history, meaning what period throughout the year was demand the highest. Okay, you can see here that's different every single year, but for 2022, you can see that we had the highest peak demand or the peak load in the last about 25 years, okay? You can see that we hit 52,000 megawatts September 6th at 4:57 p.m. Now, if you were in California during that time, that was when you got those flex alerts, right? All a flex alert is just California trying to say, hey, listen, we're using too much power and we don't have enough supply to give all the power that we need. So when this happens, the infrastructure is forced to figure out where to get power, right? They're having to tap into other sources, right? They're having to tap into natural gas, which puts stress on the grid. So this is, again, to show you that simply the problem is this, guys. The infrastructure is broken and NEM does need to be reformed if we want to fix it. Because the reality is this: if everybody goes solar under net metering 2, it's actually not good for the overall safety of the electrical grid. Because here's the facts: if the grid goes down, it's not good for any one of us. We as a society need the electrical grid to function, and we have to take emotions out and understand that solar is just one component of the electrical grid, okay? So now let's go into NEM3, all right? I just want to show you the problem, and again, I'm going to provide resources and links to where you can go research your problem to yourself, but the problem is there, and NEM3, whether we like it or not, is the solution. NEM3 is not the utilities trying to pocket more money for themselves. The data shows us, again, that California is going towards a renewable future. Remember, 2/3 of our power comes from renewable power. But as we evolve and become more and more renewable, we have to be okay with adapting with the times, all right? So enter NEM3. All right. NEM3 is addressing the problem I just listed. Remember, the problem is there's an imbalance of supply and demand. Between the hours of about 11 or let's say 10 a.m. till about 3 p.m., there is a high supply of energy via solar, but there's a lower demand of power needed, okay? Well, the utility then has to figure out, how the heck do we store this energy? What do we do with it? And as more people go solar, they have to then figure out more and more. Then fast forward to about 7 p.m., right? 7 p.m., the peak is the highest, right? I just showed you a graph that shows you that is when people are using power the most, right? 7, 8 p.m., because that's when people are home. But then the supply for energy is very low. So then now the utilities problem is, or the infrastructure's problem is, how do we supply all this energy, because we can no longer rely on renewable power because the solar's not working anymore, okay? Well, enter NEM3, all right? NEM3 is solving that problem, okay? And here's how. 5 things we got to know about NEM3, okay? Number 1, it features a major reduction in the net metering value of solar electricity, okay? This is a whole topic of itself to really understand how this works. To understand the avoided cost calculator and how it's different from it, and there's like a glide period. This is a whole nother topic that I'll go into on another video. But essentially, here's what you need to know, okay? NEM3 is pretty much forcing you to where it doesn't make sense to go solar without a battery, okay? That's pretty much the easy way I can simplify. Now, can you still go solar without a battery? Yes. Is it ideal? Most likely not. Most likely a consumer could potentially get screwed over if they go solar without a battery, okay? But essentially they're changing the value, right? The import and export rates of power to where it only makes sense to go solar if you had a battery, because if you don't get a battery, then you're gonna really get a much lower value, right? Right now we have retail rates with solar, meaning it's on average 30 to 35 cents, meaning that if you import or if you export a kilowatt, it's about 30, 35 cents. But then if you import it, it's also about 30, 35 cents, where it's going to be the other way around. Now, if you import a kilowatt, it's like anywhere from literally 1 to about 10 cents. If you export it, it's about 1 to 10 cents. If you import it, it's going to be like 30 cents plus, right? So it loses 75 to 80% of its value, but a battery will solve that, and I'll talk about that. All right, number 2. There are no new charges of fees, commonly known as solar taxes, but customers will have to switch to an electrification rate plan, which will add about $15 to their bill, okay? So right now we pay an interconnection fee. It's roughly $10, maybe $15 for the interconnection, right? Initially, they were proposing adding a $8 a kilowatt rate extra charge. That's not in effect, all right? However, customers will have to switch to what they call an electrification rate plan, where right now with NEM2, people have to switch over to a TOU rate plan. An electrification rate plan is essentially the EV rate plans that they currently have. So if you're in San Diego Gas and Electric area, that means that if you go solar after April 15th, you have to switch to EV TOU 5. All right. If you're in SDE territory, you switch to TOU D prime, and then if you're PG&E, you switch to E electric. Okay. Pretty much this means that you're going to have an extra monthly fee. So right now, I'm going to use SDGE as an example. If you have the EV TOU 5 rate plan, you have to pay anywhere from about $12 to $15 a month just to be on that plan. So what that means is moving forward, consumers that get solar are going to have about roughly a $20 to $30, call it minimum bill, right? Meaning that they're still going to have to pay the utilities around $20 to $30, right? That includes the $10 to $15 connection fee, and then the $12 to $15 fee to be on that rate plan. Okay, same thing with Edison and PG&E. Okay, so again, there's about $30 that you're gonna have to account for when you talk about savings and stuff. Number 3. Pairing solar with battery storage will be more beneficial under NEM3. Okay, it's really beneficial to get a battery under NEM2, right? Because you get to store it on the lower rates and export it on the higher rates, so you get the higher credits. Pretty much under NEM3, you practically have to get a battery. And don't worry, I'll be talking about a battery and what that means, okay? Number 4, solar customers that submit their interconnection before April 14, 2023 can be grandfathered into NEM2 for 20 years, okay? In other words, between now and about, I would say, mid-March, we as sales guys, as solar companies, we should be selling as much solar as possible because they just have to submit their interconnection before April 14th. They do not have to necessarily have to be installed or even PTO'd to get it. Let's remember that, getting a complete interconnection application includes, number 1, signed contract, number 2, single line diagram, number 3, the CSLB disclosure form, which is usually on the front page of the agreement that you sign with the solar company. Number 4, consumer protection guide. And number 5, oversizing attestment if you have that as needed, okay? So we do have until then to get our customers into NEM2. And the last one, number 5, as far as things to know with NEM3, solar owners are grandfathered into NEM2 will be able to add battery storage later and remain on NEM2. Meaning, if somebody gets solar right now with just a battery, but they want to add a battery after April 14th, they can do so and they will still be in NEM2. Now, on the small print, you can add an extra system down the road, but if you add more than 1 kilowatt of power, that solar system will switch over to NEM3. So let's say you went solar in 2020, okay? Well, fast forward to 2024 or 2023. Let's say you need an add-on, right? Maybe you got an electric vehicle, more people moved in, and now you need an extra 5,000 kilowatts of power. If you get more than 1 kilowatt of a solar system, then that system that you went solar in 2020 will transition to NEM3, which is not favorable. Okay, so pretty much right now, it's best to oversize a system to prepare for future needs, right? Whether somebody gets an electric vehicle or more people are going to be moving in, or maybe they're going to have kids. So if you're talking to people, it's best to oversize it even more right now just to prepare for them, because should they choose to do an add-on down the road, it's going to make their first system switch to NEM3, which again is not favorable. Okay, so pretty much this is it's going to be very effective. It's going to be very good for realtors, for example, to understand this, to where if you're selling a home that has NEM2, you better know as a realtor the value that actually brings to the table, okay? Because the truth is a home with NEM2 is more valuable than a home that has NEM3. So if you're a realtor or you double dip and you do both, you better understand the difference, okay? So those are the 5 things to understand about NEM3, okay? Again, really how to summarize all this, guys, is really simple. It's going to be almost a priority when someone goes solar to simply get a battery, okay? And the reason for it is this, okay? I have a chart here. Now, this is an example, okay? I'm gonna show you this chart here. This chart here shows what an average, again, this is not set in stone. This is just an example for instructional purposes only. This here shows you the import price versus the export price, okay? Meaning, let's look at 8. This is 8 a.m. If you import power at 8 a.m., which is the gray one, okay? In other words, if you're getting it from the utilities, it's going to cost you roughly 20 cents. But if you export power at 8 a.m., meaning the solar system has produced power, you're not using it, so it goes out to the grid, they're only going to credit you roughly 5 pennies, okay? So as you can see, it's a massive difference, meaning it's going to cost you 20 cents to get 1 kilowatt, but they're going to credit you 5 cents for 1 kilowatt. Obviously, that's not a good deal. We know that, right? So if you have solar only, this is not a good deal. And you can see that it's a lot different between 9 and 11 o'clock, okay? So at 9, 10, 11 o'clock, the import rate is higher and the export rate is even lower, right? So now why is this the case, okay? The CPUC is essentially, again, trying to fix that problem. We do not need more power on the grid at these hours. That's the problem. We have too much power after 9 a.m., too much. Okay, so much that we're actually wasting it. That's the problem right now. So they're trying to make it to where you do not want to export power at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., even 12, 1, and 2, okay? That's what they're trying to do. We're now enter a battery, okay? What a battery will do is it will store the power at these times. So at 9 o'clock, instead of exporting it to the grid, boom, it stores it. Should your house need power, let's say your house is using more power than what the system is generating at that time, guess what? Your house taps into the battery. And that's better because you don't want to tap into these rates, right? They're too expensive, okay? Now, what's going to happen is between the hours of 8 and you can see here between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7, 8, and 9 or 7 and 8, that is when the export rates are the highest. That's good for solar. You want to, if you have a battery, you want to offload power at these times because you get way higher credits. Okay, so if you have solar with no battery under an EM3, you get screwed because you can see here that when you would get the highest export prices, your solar system's not working. Your solar system is not producing power at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. It's just not. But if you have a battery under an EM3, you're getting the highest credits. So with a battery, you essentially avoid all this, the avoided cost calculators, which again, that's a very complex subject in itself because it changes region by region, hour by hour, month by month. It's a very complex system, but to just simplify it, you essentially want to simply, with a battery, you want to charge the batteries when the sun is out, because remember, the problem, that's when the grid does not need your power at that time. The grid needs your power after 7 p.m. So after 7 p.m., you are incentivized to then offload that energy from the battery to the grid, right? You get higher credits, and then you help the infrastructure, because then the utilities, right, going back to this chart here, where supply of energy at 10:15 p.m., right? Now the utilities or the infrastructure can rely more on the renewable energy. They're not having to tap into natural gas and fossil coals and all that stuff, okay? The chart here, we have to be willing to understand that batteries are just a solution to this problem that we have. And this chart here kind of, I hope, helps explain why that is the case, okay? Because under an EM3, if someone gets a battery, then they will simply charge during the day, and then they will use the battery around, 4 or 5, or, after the sun maybe goes down, they'll rely on the battery for a little bit and then offload at night to get those higher credits, and then, of course, rely on the grid after that. But again, if you look here, the import price at call it 9, 10, or from 9 p.m. to again at 9, 8, or from 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. when the solar's working again, you can see it's a lot lower than the export prices that you got, okay? Now, it's still not an equal one-for-one, but a battery will still help offset some of those costs as well. A major theme in NEM3 is essentially, I've been saying, a push for pairing solar with the battery storage, okay? So a big question we get all the time is, well, what about supply chain with battery storage right now, okay? The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which if you don't know, was a $369 billion, $369 billion of it was just for climate and clean energy projects, okay? So in the IRA, it actually introduces several provisions which may be well of interest to battery manufacturers. So most of these are contained in what's called the Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit, or the PTC provisions of the Act, which all this to say, if you actually read the print in the IRA, there is actually a lot of incentives for battery manufacturers to manufacture batteries. That hasn't happened. So I know right now people are saying, oh, well, there's a big supply chain issues with batteries. Yes, that is the case right right now. But America is a capitalist country, and as a capitalist country where there's always opportunity, and with the IRA, there's now more opportunity for manufacturers to want to manufacture batteries, and there's a lot of incentives and tax credits to where if you now manufacture batteries in 2023, there's a lot of tax breaks you get. So I do believe, and this is the only unknown that it's only time will tell, but I do believe that there will be companies out there who see a lot of incentives in this, who see that, okay, supply for batteries are about to go up in California. There's a lot of incentives under the IRA, and they will take advantage of those incentives. No different than how manufacturers started to produce a lot of solar panels the moment the ITC was introduced, right? Remember this, solar has been a thing in California since 1970, okay? But the moment the ITC was introduced, guess what happened with solar production? Went up. Right? I believe it'll be the same thing, because if you actually read the IRA, there's a lot of incentives for manufacturers to generate batteries domestically, okay? Yes, right now China controls 80% of lithium ion. They control also 80% of the cobalt, which are necessary minerals. But if you read the fine print, there's a lot of incentives to manufacture it domestically or with any other countries that are part of a free trade agreement. So read on it, post a link about it. And then the second thing about batteries is they're also introducing what's called a battery passport. One of the challenges with battery manufacturing is that it's hard to track the origin of that battery. But there's a new concept called the battery passport, which I won't get into it here. There's an article I will post that the battery passport, they're saying, could be the key to increasing manufacturing of batteries, okay? So, and then the last thing about batteries is it's important to note that so everything I just mentioned is what's happening at a federal level. Now, on a state level, part of NEM3 was that they're going to include about $900 million for the SDGE, right? The SDGE is the Self-Generation Incentive Program. It's essentially an incentive that helps people get batteries, okay? So they're going to add 900 million more. So there'll be more incentives, whether a customer does a finance with a battery, there'll be incentives they can get, or I believe with companies like Sunrun or Sonova that have PPAs, I believe it'll be more cost effective to still do it, because Sunrun right now for example, if you sell PPAs, Sunrun right now claims the SDGE for any battery PPAs that a consultant sells, and I believe they'll be able to claim more of these incentives as well, which will still make battery PPAs a good model for consumers that maybe don't want to do a loan. But even if you do want to do a loan or you want to buy cash, the SDGE will also provide some relief for that as well. So again, I'll provide information, but I do believe, this is my professional opinion, I do believe that there will be an uptick in battery production come next year because of the IRA and because of the SDGE being increased to 900 million just for next year alone, okay? So let's close this out, okay? How do we make sense of all this? What does this mean for us salespeople, for us solar companies, okay? So here are just some tips that I have for us to have a great 2023. Because remember, I believe this is actually good for the energy infrastructure, for the evolution of the energy infrastructure. I get it. Maybe it's not good for solar, but it is good for the evolution of energy infrastructure, because the data shows you guys, again, that if everybody went solar under NEM2, we would actually have a problem. Supply would be way too high. The grid cannot sustain that much power. So with NEM3, what it's doing is it's offloading some of that stress on the grid into each individual homeowner, because now when everybody gets solar, now energy can be stored in the batteries as opposed to on the grid. Because remember, with NEM2, essentially the grid, the infrastructure acts as the battery, and the infrastructure is reaching its capacity. It can't store more power. So let's understand this is a good thing, because that shows that we did our job, guys. We did our job. Congratulations. We sold so much solar that we broke the system. And because we broke the system, we need to now reform the system. And this is the evolution of solar, okay? So here are some great tips. Number one, educate yourself. Read the 260-page CPC proposal. Go on every link I'll post in the caption here. It's about 10 of them, and read, educate yourself. Have conviction that this is what's needed. Maybe not what you want, but this is what's needed for the evolution of energy independence in California. And if you still in another market, understand that in the years to come, this might happen to you as well. So you better also educate yourself on it so that you can be best prepared for it. Okay, but I still believe even with these changes, California is still a tier 1 market for solar. It's still better than any other market. Okay, all this means is customers will save, maybe instead of 50% savings, now they're going to get 25% savings, 20% savings. Listen, when I was selling solar in California in 2016, we were giving people like 15% savings, and they were loving it. All right, fast forward to 2022, we are spoiled. We get to sell 50, 60, 70% savings sometimes. We're spoiled. Oh, boo-hoo, we go down now to 25%. We can figure it out. We're salespeople. We adapt and overcome. I sold solar when it was 15% savings. We can do this, okay? So tip number 2. Right now, the focus should be, yes, learn, but also just simply push as many people over to NEM2 between now and April 14th. Now, I would say come mid-March, depending on your installer, you're pushing it. I would not be promising NEM2 come in March because in the event your installer doesn't meet those timelines, then they're on NEM3, all right? But I'm pretty confident if you have a reputable installer, a good installer, if you need an installer, hit me up. But you can totally still go solar between now and about March and still, submit that interconnection application and get under NEM2, even if you don't get installed until after April or PTO'd after April, all right? So huge push. Tip number 3, okay? We will need, as salespeople, we're going to have to understand usage better. Okay, SDGE, for example, there's a chart where it literally shows you how much power was on peak, off peak, and super off peak. Now, when we do consultations, we're going to have to use those usage because practically we are designing 2 systems now under NEM3. Okay, what I mean by that is the first system is how much energy the homeowner is using, okay, which has been same as always. All right, so we're going to look at how much they're using. But the second system, and again, this is I'm just speaking in metaphors. The second system is how much battery storage they're going to require at nighttime. So we have to understand that moving in NEM3, we're going to have to be better at studying their usage. It can't kind of be this one size fits all. We're going to really have to look at, okay, how much power is coming on peak and how much power is coming from the off peak and super off peak periods. Because if somebody's using a lot of power on peak, 4 to 9, they're going to probably need more batteries, right? Maybe 2 batteries. Now, if someone's not using that much power between 4 to 9, 1 battery could suffice. So we're going to have to be better at understanding their usage so that we can better customize their solar system. All right. Tip number 4, under NEM, for example, under NEM2, we could no longer pretty much install in north-facing, right? North-facing roof planes didn't make sense under NEM2. Now, under NEM1, you could sell on you could install on a north-facing roof plane, and nothing really happened with the savings for the customer, right? With NEM2, we had to pivot to only selling south and west-facing so we can capture most of the production after 4 p.m. so that we could get those higher export rates. With NEM3, the interesting thing is we're actually going to have to install on east, west, and south. Okay, this is a vague calculation. I actually got this from a guy that had sold in Hawaii, but he said roughly 20% east, 50% south, and 30% west. This provides a more even generation curve throughout the day. Now, this is customer specific, right? So when we design a system, we're gonna have to do, again, 20% east, about 50% south, and 30% west. Why? So we can capture the generation throughout the whole day. Because at 9 a.m., for example, if you design a system only on west facing, you're not getting any generation. And then the customer is having those high import rates. You don't want that, right? You want the customer to generate some on the east facing, so to capture the morning, the south facing and west to capture the afternoon, and then the west to capture after 4 p.m. in the summertime, right? So we will have to design systems a little bit different, but ultimately we have to understand that this is going to be customer specific. For example, if a family's gone all day, let's say in your consultation, they're like, yep, we're not really here most days from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Then for that customer, you're going to want to design more on the west. But if a customer says, yep, we're here all day long, then you do more of that, some east, some west, some south. So we have to understand that if we want to be better going into next year, our consultations will have to be more custom tailored than they have been, all right? Number 5, we're going to have to become an expert in the battery storage component. We're going to have to learn the capabilities, learn the functions, and the benefits, okay? We cannot be afraid to sell batteries. We just can't. Okay, change is good. Remember, this is for the change of the energy infrastructure. All right. Number 6, we have to also understand with batteries that usually one battery needs about 5.2 kilowatt of a solar system. Meaning, if you give them a 3 kilowatt system, one battery really won't be enough to charge that battery, and then also have enough to export during the nighttime. So the minimum system size should be around 5 kilowatts. For everybody, but that's fine. They'll just have more power they can sell back to the grid, even if they're not using all that power. So understand that one battery is about 5.2 kilowatts. 2 batteries is about for an 11 kilowatt system. So meaning if you want to charge 2 batteries, you're going to need about an 11 kilowatt. But I will say that especially in Southern California, the average system size is about 5. So the good news is that the majority of consumers will just need one battery. Now, when I say one battery, this is not to protect them against blackouts. For blackouts, you probably will need 2 or more, but most people shouldn't be doing that anyways. One battery will be enough to protect them with the ACC, the avoided cost calculator, and all that, okay? Seventh thing we have to understand going into next year is we're going to make mistakes, okay? It's fine. The transitional period will be rough, but guys, we'll get through it. When we transitioned from NEM1 to NEM2, it was rough at first. We had to learn, we had to adapt, but eventually it became the norm. The same thing will happen. The market will adapt, okay? Don't be afraid. The market will adapt. The truth is, every market has its challenges. You go to a market like Florida right now, the challenge that Florida has is that there is not really day one savings, okay, the majority of the time. So they have to sell more on long-term value, right? Where in a market like California, we don't have that problem, all right? But now we have the problem of, selling batteries and etc. So understand that you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. We'll learn. We'll get better. And then the last thing is we have to have conviction that this is what's best for energy independence in California. And I hope I've shown you guys the data to show that this NEM3 is not the utilities trying to get more money. The infrastructure is broken. We've done our job. NEM worked. We did it. And so because of that, we have to reform. We have to get more batteries on the electrical grid, okay? And yes, NEM3 is set up in such a way where it no longer makes sense to get solar without a battery, but that's just where we're at. This happened to Hawaii. The same thing happened to Hawaii in about 2017. The infrastructure broke. And then now you go to Hawaii, everybody has a battery, but that's good for the independence of energy in Hawaii. Well, same thing here, okay? So this is a good thing. I hope I brought value. If you have anything you want to add, please hit me my DM, comment on this video. I love studying this stuff, and if you want to have a conversation, let's talk. NEM3, I get it. It's not best for solar, but it is what's best for the overall energy independence, and solar is just one component of it. So let's adapt. Let's be men and women who can do hard things, and I will see you selling solar in 2023.